You still don't have a Mega CD?
Huh?
What are you waiting for? Nintendo to make one?
Nintendo Mega CD? What?
You have seen the games, right?
What's a Mega CD? Is that like a laser disc or something?
Laserdisc? I'm talking about the CD add-on for the Sega Mega Drive, dumbass!
Sega Mega Drive? Oh, you mean the Sega CD?
Yeah, that's right. You bloody Americans rename everything. No wonder your country's going to hell. Shum!
Genesis does what Nintendo don't. Does what Nintendo don't.
Normally, a Ranma 1/2 character profile has a staunch, no spoilers rule. Character profiles are not only intended for the knowledgeable Ranma fan to grasp additional enjoyment from the characters and storylines they so love, but are vehicles for non-fans to go and seek their own answers. But this is a tale of forgotten lore, a tale which has been buried deep below the earth, stricken from public knowledge. In this case, the answers are not on display for one to merely take. So, just this once, the entire tale will be told with a beginning, a middle, an end. To spare the curious viewers the back-breaking labor, just this once, it's story time with DJ Clive. In a previous profile, we talked about the NEC PC Engine Duo. The PC Engine was the first video game console to have a CD-ROM-based attachment. Needless to say, a few other consoles followed suit with their own CD-ROM peripherals, or at least tried to release one. Perhaps the most famous example of a console to have such an accessory was the Sega Mega Drive, better known as the Sega Genesis in the US. It was, essentially, a Sega Master System on steroids! You could even play your old 8-bit Master System games on it with a special adapter. Plus, it had its own library of 16-bit games. It was region-free, meaning that you could play games from any country, and had groundbreaking graphics and sound! Ultimately, the Genesis was intended primarily to compete with the Nintendo Entertainment System. It all came down to the fact that Genesis was 16-bit, while the NES was only 8-bit. Sega's entire marketing campaign was that the Genesis could play advanced games that the NES couldn't.
Genesis does
16-bit arcade graphics.
You can't do this on Nintendo. Genesis
Does.
Genesis
Does.
Genesis
Does.
Genesis
Does.
Genesis does.
What Nintendo?
But that all changed when Nintendo released their own 16-bit console, the Super Nintendo. The Genesis may have had a 2-year head start, but Nintendo used that extra time to one-up the competition. The Super Nintendo reversed Sega's technical superiority. Sega responded by dropping the price of the Genesis and bundling it with their new best-selling game, Sonic the Hedgehog. but they needed something to put their Genesis back on top. And so, they released a CD-ROM drive for the Genesis called the Sega Mega CD, or just Sega CD as it was known in the States. The key benefit of CD-ROMs is that they can store larger and thus more elaborate games than cartridges. A typical Genesis or even SNES game cartridge can hold about 32 megabits of data, or some 4 megabytes. A CD-ROM can store up to 650 megabytes! And for obvious reasons, they have the added bonus of CD quality sounds and even full motion video. This combination could even double as a music CD player and karaoke device.
Feel covered in black and fire, out of control, but I'm tired of sight. Come in, come out tonight.
Nintendo were genuinely scared of this machine, so much so that they teamed up with Sony to produce their own CD-ROM based add-on for the Super Nintendo. The deal backfired big time, and in doing so they created their most dominant rival, the PlayStation line of consoles. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Ultimately, the Sega CD helped Sega bridge their technical gap with Nintendo and gave them some advantages, but it wouldn't win them the war. The Super Nintendo sold about 49 million units worldwide. The Genesis only sold close to 31 million units worldwide, and to add insult to injury, only 2.2 million Sega CDs were sold, leaving much of its game library undiscovered. So what went wrong? Well, first of all, the add-on itself was extraordinarily expensive at launch and required the Genesis to even work. Secondly, it also required its own power brick, those big-ass power bricks that take up so much space. So that's at least 3 power sockets needed, one for the TV, one for the Genesis, and one for the Sega CD. And if you already had a VCR or, hell, tried to add a 32X to the mix, it'd be even more claustrophobic. And thirdly, the biggest Achilles heel was its library of games. Most of these titles were not so much games, but rather interactive movies.
I was so afraid you decided not to come.
While some Sega CD games did indeed take advantage of the additional storage capacity, better quality sound, and other features afforded to it, developers for the most part took advantage of the full motion video technology. Rather than just using it for cutscenes, the Sega CD saw an abundance of FMV games and visual novels. Games that mostly use live action or animated videos to tell the story, which processes by correct input from the player when prompted to. One of these games is the subject matter of today's video. Here we have Ranma 1/2 Byakuran Aika, otherwise known as Ranma 1/2 White Orchid Serenade, one of the FMV games the Sega CD is famous for. In this game, players take control of titular character Ranma Saotome, and you select various actions and responses to take him forward throughout the story. Along the way, there are various fighting games. Again, these are full animated. The outcome of these battles are decided by games of rock, paper, scissors, similar to what you would do in Alex Kidd in Miracle World. Only your opponent's selection is not visible to the player. You have to watch very closely as the opponent flashes through the selection and see what option he ended at. The further you get into the game, the faster and faster the opponent flashes through his options, leaving no room for blinking! And you also have to be able to read Japanese, as we have Japanese kanji instead of actual hand gestures. Needless to say, this game never got an international release. But that is not the only reason why this game faded into obscurity. Remember that region-free feature I mentioned earlier? Well, in 1993, Sega started region encoding their games, meaning if you had a PAL or Japanese game that was released after 1993 and tried to play it on your normally region-free NTSC console, you'll get an error message. And unfortunately, Ranma's debut on the Sega CD is one of those games. Of course, nowadays, it's easy to get around region lockouts with magic key adapters for cartridge games, and EverDrive cartridges to load the appropriate CD BIOS via an SD card. But, back in the day, This meant if you wanted to play this game, you not only had to get a Japanese Sega Mega Drive, but you also needed a Japanese Sega Mega CD. And of course, if you lived in a PAL region, you also need to buy 2 step-down transformers, one for Mega Drive and one for the Mega CD, or you'd blow up your equipment. Of course, in recent times, the Genesis games are readily available to modern consumers thanks to the at-games plug-and-play variant, which accepts the original cartridges and has many Genesis games built in. But this device is stripped of the expansion port and is completely incompatible with the Genesis's various add-ons. It won't plug into the Sega CD. Hell, even the Master System adapter won't work on this thing. If you want to play Sega CD games, you definitely need the original hardware. It's no wonder why few people played this game. So, what secrets does it hold? The year 1993. A Saturday. It was status quo in Nerima Square, as a bickering Ranma Saotome and Akane Tendo were hot-footing it home from school. Wondering where P-chan wandered off to this time. Idle chit-chat. Awaiting they in his usual spot was a giddy Son Tendo, reading his daily news, relaxing, scheming. He immediately informed the two of a particular advertisement which had caught his eye. A new business called the exciting, heart-throbbing Date Center. A date center! What more perfect opportunity for Ranma and Akane to further their ever-tumultuous relationship? The specifics? Not important. All that mattered were the 2 words, date center. His eyes had caught the words like a sign from the maker. Son offered to make a reservation, but Akane and Ranma wanted no part of it. When, all of a sudden, "Oh, Akane Tendo! I shall go with you in that beast Ranma's stead!" Pow! And he's airborne. Like I said, status quo. And it was to continue, if only a little bit longer. Ranma and Akane, fresh off the day's recent hijinks, were quibbling back and forth when Nabiki suddenly reared her devious head. Cryptically, she informed Ranma that she had vital information for him. Information pertaining to his body. Ranma, instantly concluding she had some unknown knowledge of Jusenkyo, his cursed form, a possible cure, pleaded for Nabiki to spill her guts, but the conniving con woman would not say a word until Ranma put 3,000 yen into her paw. What a wonderful future sister-in-law. Ranma was broke, destitute. He didn't carry around that kind of money. So he begged Akane to spot him the cash this one time. After some convincing, he nabbed the yen he needed and searched out the gold digger Nabiki. Funny, he looked everywhere. She was nowhere to be found. They checked with Kasumi and Son. They didn't know. Hell, Son was more concerned about plugging that date center of his, slipping a pamphlet and completed registration form into Ranma's pocket. Whatever, it was less bother to just humor the old man. Ranma had just seen Nabiki. Where could she have gone? And furthermore, as he probed his mind over the day's strange events, where was Genma? He hadn't seen hide nor hair of him the entire day. Oh well, no biggie. Nabiki's a social phantom that way, always taking little constitutionals here and there. She'd be back before nightfall, no doubt. As for Genma, he was probably heaving food off some poor schmo like usual. Who knew when he'd be back and who really gave a rat's ass? Ranma and Akane strolled out to the street to see if they could find Nabiki, only to find... a mysterious car peeling rubber out of there! Outside the gate of the Tendo home stood Ranma's childhood pal, Ukyo Kuonji. When questioned about Nabiki, Ukyo mentioned to Ranma that she definitely saw Nabiki get into the car before it left. Shoot, of all the rotten luck. So what else is going on, Ukyo? Ukyo then exclaimed she too heard a rumor, and it pertained to Ranma's body. Thankfully, Ukyo was a true blue friend, not the type who would sit on pertinent information to strangle Ranma for inordinate amounts of yen like some people we know. Ukyo explained of a strange laboratory experimenting with the cursed waters of Jusenkyo, studying its properties. Perchance, did these nameless scientists hold in their hands the cure for Ranma's condition? Maybe, maybe not. But Ranma would be foolish not to do some digging. Ukyo would lead Ranma there, but only him. Akane could not tag along. This didn't concern her. With this news, Ranma said, "Screw Akane! Screw Nabiki! Eyes on the prize! Let's head off to this mysterious lab!" Ukyo was tickled pink to be heading out on an adventure. Just the two of they. And oh, how grateful would Ranma be if his dream to excise his girl half came to fruition as a result. Who knew? Maybe he would repay her with the love and admiration she so desired. But in Ukyo's blind glee, she didn't take into account that her route would pass they right by Nerima's shopping district, right by the Cat Cafe, and Shampoo could sniff out Ranma's presence with cat-like senses. Let's not forget, she too is a Jusenkyo victim who would love to ditch her other half. Within seconds, the bubbly China girl intercepted, did the proverbial "don't mind if I do," and became a part of this motley crew. But before leaving the cafe, our traveling party briefly spoke with Shampoo's great-grandmother Cologne, who was concerned about Moose. He had left a sink full of dirty dishes and was off lollygagging somewhere. First Pichon, then Genma, then Nabiki, now Moose? A bizarre coincidence? After a short hike through town, our heroes arrived at their destination. And by God, how did they not notice this building sooner? Blockaded by a gigantic circular wall stretching several city blocks and further surrounded by dense forest, an enormous spire loomed over our heroes' heads, the top of which barely visible amidst the deep blood-orange clouds. As our heroes drew closer, the darkness seemed to permeate more. Its foreboding iron gates, sizable for usage by some sort of giant. The only clue to the creatures dwelling within, the nameplate emblazoned on the golden wall, Nanjo. Even the font of which sent shivers. Ranma spied a door buzzer beneath the nameplate and pressed it. A garbled voice instructed they to move forth, and the gates unlocked. As Ranma pressed on, he couldn't shake the feeling there was someone or something else out there. A fourth, invisible specter traveling alongside. Ranma could not investigate, as the laboratory was way more important. For now, he would just throw that uneasy feeling on the weird pile. The gate doors creaked open to an enormous, lavish chamber bathed in the rosy afterglow of an eternal sunset. In the center stood a stoic figure. Finally, another human being. It was time for some answers. The man, professionally adorned in white, thanked our heroes for coming, that their arrival was suspected. He said that he had received reservations from one Mr. Son Tendo for Ranma Saotome and Akane Tendo. But that doesn't... Oh, that stupid date center! Ah! This couldn't be right! But indeed it was. Ranma recalled the pamphlet Son had planted on him, and sure enough, the word Nanjo was printed on it, clear as crystal. The Nanjo Date Center. The dapper young man introduced himself as cutey-pitootey, the manager of the Date Center. Ranma's heart pounded in his chest as he asked about the laboratory which was supposed to be here. Futei reassured our heroes that they were in the right place. The laboratory was a side business. Whichever of their services they were about to partake, though, they would first have to meet face-to-face with Nanjo. Futei guided our trio through the edifice's labyrinth quarters and opened yet another set of giant double doors. This was the biggest chamber yet, resembling a grand ballroom with nothing but open space. A shapely form stood at the back of the room, staring out the back window, a quintet of stained glass beaming a heavenly spotlight for the figure to step into. Ranma was fast growing impatient. The ego on this one. What was wrong with just introducing yourself like a normal human being? Just can the theatrics and cure my body, for crying out loud! The robust creature pivoted to face Saotome, covered in pink frills from head to foot. Expensively, immaculately dressed, she slid forth like a serpent, uncomfortably close to Ranma. "Welcome, Mr. Saotome. I am Arisa Nanjo," she uttered, as her cold eyes formed the letter V in her face. Suddenly, from high up above, a watery plume engulfed Ranma! As he became a she, clothes heavy with drippage. Ranma winced as Arisa's eyes grew with excitement. Before Ranma could even react, Arisa, with giggling girlish glee, jumped upon him with a tight embrace, as if she had just found her kindred spirit. Great, Ranma had come looking for a cure, and gained another wannabe fiancé! And speaking of fiancés, Ukyo and Shampoo were the only obstacles to Miss Nanjo's brilliant scheme, and henceforth subject to banishment. Ranma wouldn't stand for that, cure or no cure! But before he could act, Nanjo disappeared through a door, leaving Ranma alone with cutey-pitootey. And when he tried to shake the man for some answers, he was struck in the back of the head by some unnatural, animalistic force. As he drifted into the arms of unconsciousness, he was able to identify the stranger what had been following they. It was Akane. She had been sneaking in close pursuit since they initially left the dojo. But as she ran to help her man, from out the shadows, a bullet-like shot rang to the back of her cranium. And it was darkness for them both. Ranma opened his eyes to find he and Akane laying in a field of green grass, surrounded by pink and white orchid blossoms, the sun glaring overhead. Most likely, they were now somewhere in that gigantic circular jungle land surrounding the center tower. They had to have been knocked out for hours. Ranma was pissed off at his situation, but more so at Akane for butting in where she was not wanted. Now she had become yet another liability. This was the last thing he needed. Maybe second to last, for as the two set out to explore their surroundings. Where on earth am I now? Ryoga Hibiki emerged, hot-headed and ready to brawl. This was hardly the time or place, but Ranma took his challenge, and the two pugilists had a battle for the ages! In the aftermath, Ranma left Ryoga scorched in a heap, courtesy of a well-aimed Hiryu Shotenha. But there was no rest for the weary, for as our brave heroes trudged forward, they managed to find Shampoo in the midst of her own battle with a giant, formless, purple thing. I guess you could say it was a great big Buyo Buyo! Ranma was still licking his wounds from the prior battle, but he had no choice but to square off with this massive purple fromage to protect Shampoo. The thing would occasionally absorb Ranma like an amoeba, floating he around its fluid form, but it was no match for Ranma's Kempo, and the purple blob grimaced in defeat. What manner of beast was this? What the hell was going on at this place? Shampoo had a bit more information since she was conscious whilst transported here. They were in sort of a subterranean terrarium beneath the Minami house, populated with hostile creatures at every turn. Ranma found this hard to believe, as it felt as if they were in a sweltering rainforest. But sure enough, he looked up, and he could clearly see the outlines of a dome-shaped enclosure. Thankfully, there was a hot springs nearby, which Ranma could use to return to his male form. At long last, after so much fighting, a brief moment of respite. The three soaked in the healing waters of the spring, which had been divided by rock formations to separate the girls and boys. They used the time to speculate. Their captors, Arisa Nanjo and cutey-pitootey, what was their motivation? How were the Nanjo Date Center and Jusenkyo Laboratory connected? And why? Was Shampoo suddenly jumping into the boys' side with Ranma? So much for R&R. Our band of three dried off and walked along the bank of a simulated river. What's this? This sort of primeval weapon could only be... Unfortunately for our cadre of miscreants, Moose was injected with rage upon learning Ranma and Shampoo shared a hot soak together. The two combatants squared off, and Moose was fighting to kill. Ranma did his best to stave off his opponent's murderous rampage, and with a swift pump kick to the gut, he sent Moose careening into the river, changing him into a puny widow moo-moo. Pathetic. Ranma and his friends abandoned the helpless duck, for he would only cause more trouble. As our party marched on, they encountered even more of their lost friends. With a rustle in the underbrush, out stumbled the oafish Genmasao Tomei, or rather, Mr. Panda. For reasons unknown, probably one of his personal, futile reconnaissance missions, he was using his panda form as a disguise, and not even revealing himself to his own son. Ranma? He knew it was him. What other panda out there used wooden signs to communicate? But time was of the essence. He couldn't waste time trying to get through to the old man. Not a minute later, the familiar doughy scent of okonomiyaki filled the air. No doubt, it had to be Ukyo. They found her not only unharmed, but setting up shop with a congregation of hungry scientists encircling her. Ah, Ukyo Kuonji, shrewd businesswoman to the very end. The customers turned out to be workers for the Jusenkyo Research Institute, and Ranma grilled the pint-sized researcher at the front of the line for some information. It turned out they were, indeed, attempting an antidote for Jusenkyo's deleterious waters, and they were on the verge of a breakthrough! They found a way to negate the cursed form altogether, but with a caveat. The cursed individual would be mutated into a living abomination as a result, and all the creatures wandering around this underground jungle were all test subjects. Oh well, this was just dandy! Some cure this was! Why would Ukyo knowingly take Ranma to such a terrible place? Ah, but the plot thickens, for Ukyo was given only partial information. Information, which cost her 3,000 yen. Oh no! Oh no! Yep, this was all Nabiki Tendo's doing from the very start. Who knew what role she played in this evil plot, but chances were she was a big player. At that, a tone played over the PA, and the researchers crowded into an elevator to return to their duties. Ranma tried to hitch a ride, but the elevator would only accept Jusenkyo Research Institute employees. They all got in, the doors closed, Ranma helplessly watched the elevator go all the way up, and all the way back down. When the doors opened, there stood a startled cutey-pitootey! Finally, face to face with one of the guys at the top of the ladder! He would be their key to escaping this hellhole. Oh shoot! Ryoga Hibiki is back! Talk about horrible timing! As Ranma and Ryoga went into attack mode, the scaredy cat Futei retreated back up the elevator. And as if their luck couldn't get any worse, Ryoga threw a wild punch, missing Ranma completely and destroying the control panel for the elevator, and their only hope for escape. Damn you, Ryoga! You ruined everything! Ranma and Ryoga had to put their heads together to solve this new turn of events. Between the two of they shared one fully functional brain. Together, they busted their way into the elevator shaft and climbed the cables, suffering in each other's company the whole way. So high up, must have been some kind of Guinness World Record. But eventually they busted their way into the elevator from the bottom and escaped the shaft. Hey, What were the ladies doing during all of this? Oh, they took the stairs. The stairs? Damn it! But wait, 1, 2... There's supposed to be 3 of you. Alright, what happened to Akane? Don't tell me. Kidnapped. Why, oh why did she have to butt in? All of a sudden, Kato Fute made his presence known, and this time he had some major backup. A 10-foot tall, muscle-bound creature known as Bio Number 1, a bionic, anthropomorphic tortoise clad in full sumo gear. Ranma was almost positive that this was the same creature which nearly concussed he and Akane earlier, and the Bio had more than a few tricks up its non-existent sleeves. With a rucksack full of cold H2O, it was able to convert the Jusenkyo victims to cursed form, negating their power. It attacked Ranma with razor claws, lethal belly flop attacks, and the water supply on its back shot a jet stream akin to a shoulder-mounted bazooka! Overkill is an understatement when it comes to the dreaded Bio Number 1. Ukyo tried to intervene, but was knocked out cold by a vicious slap from the Bio. She fell near lifeless into Ranma's arms. Ranma held his childhood friend in a state of shock, and then he too met the same fate. With one slice of the Bio's claws, Ranma was sent flying across the corridor and into a steel water pipe. A hot water pipe. Yes! The edge that he needed! Ranma struck the pipe on the wall, spraying himself with hot water, regaining his male form. And Ukyo's sacrifice was not in vain! After a brutal game of gotcha last with the creature, Ranma grabbed Ukyo's spatula and used it to throw one of the Bio's water attacks back in its face! With that, it was bye-bye Bio. Ukyo lay semi-conscious at Ranma's feet, with Shampoo and Ryoga rendered helpless by the cold water attack. It was now just Ranma and Fute, with nothing between them but air and opportunity. Ranma grabs the old man by the collar, forcing he to talk, but Fute swore he had no idea where Arisa Nanjo was keeping Akane. Ranma, understandably, was not happy with that answer. He tied Fute up, and they were going to find Akane together, even if it meant climbing all the way up the long and winding staircase, painstakingly checking every room along the way. Every level they ascended brought they ever closer to the Catalya Tower, the top floor and heart of the Nanjo Mansion. Ranma was sure to find his endgame there. Ranma needed to know, and as the two ascended the mansion's seemingly infinite floors, he had nothing but time. What was Arisa Nanjo's purpose here? Why was Ranma so important to her? Fute tried his darndest to remain tight-lipped about the whole thing, but the rosiness in his cheeks spoke volumes. Now that you mention it, when Arisa grabbed Ranma back in that ballroom, the look on Fute's face, how he could only look ahead and not make eye contact, the little throbbing vein which appeared in his temple. How had Ranma not seen from the start? Fute had a major crush on Arisa Nanjo, but he was just a lowly scientist, and for whatever reason, she had her cat-like eyes on Ranma to be her future husband. Fute had been outed, and he continued to blabber in his defense. He kept saying he wanted to see Arisa happy, no matter what, that he wanted to protect her, to relieve her horrible pain, to cure her of the scar which has ruled her life. Ranma, confounded, had heard just about enough. He was barely the one to be giving relationship advice. Almost there, he could smell it, and as he closed in on this story's grand finale, his mind raced. What scar? What was this jerk blathering about? And why Ranma? Of all the people in the world, why was his presence so important? In the next room, a clue, one of Akane's loafers, above which an enormous painted portrait of the lady herself. Overcome with emotion at the visage of his beloved, Kato Fute explained that portrait, the day she posed for that portrait, was so much simpler, so carefree, such a genuine smile across those beautiful lips. That was a wonderful time, before the scar, before the tragic accident, before their ill-fated trip to China. Fute almost didn't need to elaborate any further. Who knew what instilled in her brain such a fascination with the land of Jusenkyo? But nonetheless, she traveled there. Such a smart girl, such an innocent girl, unaware of the danger afoot. Such a life filled with promise, all gone in an innocent little splash. Now, amongst the cursed victims of Jusenkyo, she labeled herself a freak. And she would need a fellow freak to spend the rest of her days with. The union of two miserable, suffering beings to beget mutual understanding, mutual comfort, mutual love. Yes, Fute was searching for a cure, but no matter how hard he tried, no matter how many guinea pigs he had to go through, he only succeeded in breeding more monsters. When the dream faded further and further from reality, there evolved a plan B. He would search out the downtrodden sons of Jusenkyo. He would use the monsters he helped create to collect them, and he would find the perfect match for Arisa Nanjo. He had found Genma, Ryoga, and Moose, but they didn't meet her strict touchstones. Ranma Saotome, on the other hand, was a perfect specimen, and was immediately groomed to be her perfect husband. Fute's love for Arisa was so strong, he buried his own feelings deep, deep inside, in the futile hope that someday he could see once more that genuine smile on her face. Fute's emotional diatribe shed a glow on most the mystery. Why there were two unrelated businesses under one umbrella. Why Moose, Ryoga, and Genma were taken. The very meaning of Nanjo. But one big one still remained, and it was time to reunite this shoe with its owner. Akane was very obviously being used as a bargaining chip, but Ranma Saotome didn't play that. With Fute tenuously trailing close behind, he continued to ascend the stairs until they finally came to a stop. It had to be this door, the Sanctum Sanctorum of the Catalia Tower. Ranma threw the lavishly carved double doors open to find a striking banquet hall adorned with floral arrangements and Arisa Nanjo awaiting his arrival. Innocently, she chirped, "Arisa was very worried! Where have you been all this time?" Suddenly, she was talking in the third person? This little brat was starting to remind Ranma of Azusa Shiratori! She insisted Ranma join her for dinner, but obviously he was only interested in reuniting with Akane. And at that moment, Ranma heard a familiar voice. The voice of the one key player in this whole sordid affair he had forgotten. Nabiki Tendo made her way from out the shadows, dressed in her slinkiest villainous wardrobe, brandishing a dagger. And behind the view of a huge potted plant, there was Akane, tied up, helpless. Traitorous Nabiki Tendo. She demanded Ranma to be Arisa Nanjo's betrothed. In exchange, Akane would be released unharmed. As Ryoga, Shampoo, and Ukyo arrived just in time to see the show, an uncomfortable stalemate ensued, as a pensive Ranma thought to himself, if he declined the deal, would Nabiki really hurt her little sister? Did she really value money over blood? In most cases, this would be a no-brainer, but this is Nabiki Tendo. Surely she's done worse for a buck. Ranma agreed to Arisa's terms with no backup plan to speak of, and Akane was cut free from her bonds. Arisa bounded up and down like an excitable child, so overjoyed on this, the greatest day in her life. There was only one thing left to do to make this moment perfect. She wished to show Ranma her scar. She knew in her heart of hearts, Ranma was the one man on Earth who could understand and ease her pain. And she lifted the white orchids overhead, and the water came down in a trickle, and the vase crashed down. A cat! She must have fallen into Mao Nichuan just like Shampoo! Of all the 100+ springs in Jusenkyo to fall into, she fell into the one that transformed her into the creature to which Ranma has a horrific phobia! Ranma, running frantic in fear, tripped over the vase, winging the feline Arisa across the room. Arisa wanted Ranma to be her boyfriend because she figured he'd be the only one who would appreciate her curse. Well, why the hell would she think that? He's got allurophobia! That would be like, I don't know, trying to impress Superman by wearing a kryptonite necklace! Geez, some sloppy research on the part of those scientists right there! There was no way Ranma could live the rest of his life, live in lover to a feline. It would be his own personal hell. He begged for Akane to help, but of course she took the whole thing personally and told Ranma to have a nice life. Such gratitude. Ranma called Akane on her jealousy, which she adamantly denied. In her bullheaded manner, she delivered the hot water to Arisa to change her back to female form, into the waiting arms of cutey-pitootey, who had been protecting her the whole while. Not even acknowledging him in the slightest, the naive young waif whipped back towards Ranma. Ranma, thinking on the spur of the moment, and with a bit of help from Shampoo and Ukyo, talked the tough love to Nanjo she so desperately needed to hear. For Arisa Nanjo and Ranma Saotome were never meant to be. To Ranma, the Jusenkyo curse was not a limitation in any way, especially when it came to relationships. Nor should it be. For anybody. And above all else, there was no love here. Arisa had literally chosen him out of a catalog without knowing him at all. The whole cat thing proving she really didn't know him at all. She needed to snap out of this foolishness quick before she pushed away the one man she was truly destined to be with. A man who would move mountains for her. A man who had worked tirelessly every day. A man who would gladly cripple himself for her benefit, and all he wished in return was to be able to see her smile. No, not you, you stupid buyo! Cutey-pitootey! It was finally his chance to profess his feelings. He stood there before his beloved, silent and scared, probing his brilliant mind for the correct thing to say, mentally thumbing the dictionaries in his head for words that may not exist, anxious about blowing the most important moment of his life, and when it seemed as if awkward silence would prevail over all else, Akane Tendo was there to give him that one little push. Minutes earlier, she had committed a betrayal so heinous, she would never be welcome in the family again. But Nabiki stated it was all for the greater good, that the dominoes fell exactly as planned, that cutey-pitootey and Arisa Nanjo would never have united unless Ranma, Akane, and herself played these specific roles to the hilt. With that, she was all too easily back in our hero's good graces. It was already nightfall, and our hero started on the long trek home. Akane asked Ranma, "Why did you come all that way to save me?" To which he replied, "Because I will always save you." Akane, for a brief second, was lost in the moment. How romantic was this? No matter what it entailed, from a physical kidnapping to the painful moments of life, this wonderful young man would be there to protect her, to take care of her, to lean on and persevere through life, side by side. Ranma continued, "My scar is that I'll always have to save your dumbass! This whole thing would have gone by so much quicker and easier if you hadn't stuck your nose into my business!" As the two needled at each other like they always do, they took one last look at the tower, all aglow amidst the soft light of the city. They both wondered if Arisa Nanjo and cutey-pitootey would figure it all out, if they could shake off their personal hang-ups and make a life together. Perhaps, the day they were to see them again, they may already be husband and wife. All questions for another time. After a long, crazy day full of hijinks, they were all ready for a little status quo in Nerima Square. A Sunday, the year 1993.
In your dreams, magical thoughts All things are real unless you dream they're not. In your dreams, love is the plot, carried on wings of hope. Each of our souls intertwine when we do. Instantly we see it, the time to grow and be it, when everything is pinned on a hold. Let rise the dreams of your heart, that innocent youth, careless and kind, free to roam the breeze in love, only when two brilliantly shine as
This has been a Ranma 1/2 Character Profile! With guest appearance by Tim Darby. Special thanks go out to our translators, Anthony Angel Lopez Andrade, Christine Ware, Misaki Ohashi, Cindy Tron, Aofi Wilkinson, and William Smith. With an extra special thanks to Dr. Shavalin Svetinant. And an extra special thanks to Jara's grandmother for hooking he and his sister up with a Japanese Sega Mega Drive back in the day. This profile was brought to you in part by JW Studios.